The morning sun had barely kissed the ancient stone walls of Kensington Palace when Officer James Mitchell noticed something unusual during his routine patrol. His boots echoed against the marble floors as he walked past portraits of generations of royals, their painted eyes seeming to follow his every step. At 43 years old, James had served the royal family for nearly 2 decades, and he prided himself on knowing when something felt wrong. Today, that familiar tingle ran down his spine. The first sign came from the kitchen staff. Mrs. Eleanor Chapman, the head cook who had been preparing royal meals since before Princess Charlotte was born, stood wringing her hands near the servant entrance. Her normally rosy cheeks had gone pale, and her apron was twisted in her grip. "Officer Mitchell," she whispered urgently, glancing over her shoulder. "Something happened this morning. Princess Charlotte, she ran right past me in the hallway, tears streaming down her face. I tried to ask what was wrong, but she wouldn't stop, just kept running toward the private quarters." James felt his stomach tighten. Princess Charlotte, at 9 years old, had always been described as composed and graceful beyond her years. The public knew her as the smiling little girl who waved from palace balconies and charmed everyone she met. To hear that she had been running and crying sent alarm bells ringing in his mind. "When was this?" James asked, already moving toward his radio. "About 20 minutes ago," Mrs. Chapman replied. "I would have called someone sooner, but I thought maybe she just had a bad dream or something. But officer, I've never seen her like that. Never." James quickly contacted his supervisor, explaining the situation in careful, measured tones. Protocol was everything in royal protection. You didn't just burst into the private family quarters because a child was upset, but you also didn't ignore potential threats or emergencies. Within minutes, he received clearance to discreetly investigate. As he made his way through the palace's labyrinthine corridors, James encountered more staff members who reported similar observations. A housemaid had heard raised voices from one of the sitting rooms earlier that morning. The groundskeeper mentioned seeing Prince William's car arrive much earlier than usual, its tires screeching slightly on the gravel drive. Each piece of information painted a picture of a morning gone terribly wrong. When James reached the family wing, he found Catherine's personal assistant, Sophie Bennet, standing outside a closed door. Sophie was 28, efficient, and rarely showed emotion, but now her hands trembled as she clutched her phone. "Oh, thank goodness," Sophie breathed when she saw him. "I didn't know who else to call. The Princess of Wales asked me to step out, but I can hear Charlotte sobbing in there. She won't come out and her mother sounds absolutely devastated." James approached the door carefully. He could indeed hear the heartbreaking sound of a child's sobs mixed with a woman's gentle, soothing voice. But there was something else too, an edge of desperation in Catherine's tone that he had never heard before. "Your Royal Highness," James called softly through the door. "It's Officer Mitchell. Is everything all right? Do you need assistance?" There was a long pause. The sobbing quieted slightly. Then Catherine's voice came through, strained but trying to remain composed. "James, please, I need you to contact someone, but this must remain absolutely private. Do you understand?" "Of course, ma'am. Who should I contact?" "Dr. Sarah Henderson. She's a child psychologist. Her number should be in my private directory. Tell her it's urgent. Tell her Charlotte needs her right away." James felt his chest constrict. A psychologist. This was more serious than he had imagined. "Right away, ma'am. Should I notify Prince William?" Another pause. "He's already on his way back from his morning engagement. But yes, please make sure he knows to come straight here. Not to the office. Straight here." As James stepped away to make the calls, his mind raced. In all his years of service, he had seen many things. Royal arguments, family tensions, the pressures of public life weighing on even the youngest members. But this felt different. The raw emotion in Catherine's voice, the desperation, the urgency, it spoke of something deeply troubling. Dr. Henderson answered on the second ring. When James explained the situation, using only the necessary details, she immediately canceled her morning appointments. "I'll be there in 15 minutes," she said firmly. "Please tell the princess I'm coming." Next, James contacted William's protection officer. The message was relayed quickly, and within seconds he heard the prince's voice in the background, sharp with concern. "Tell Mitchell I'm 10 minutes away. Clear the route." As James returned to his position near the door, he could hear Catherine talking softly to Charlotte. The words were indistinct, but the tone was one of infinite patience and love. He thought about his own daughters, now grown, and remembered the times they had come to him with problems that seemed world-ending to their young hearts. But this was different. This was a princess, a child born into extraordinary circumstances, facing pressures most people could never imagine. Sophie paced nearby, her professional composure cracking. "Should I call anyone else?" she asked James quietly. "The Queen, Prince Charles." James shook his head. "Let's wait for the prince. This is their call to make." The minutes crawled by. Other staff members appeared in the corridor, drawn by the unusual activity, but James firmly but kindly sent them away. The last thing this family needed was palace gossip spreading before they even understood what was happening. Finally, rapid footsteps echoed down the hallway. Prince William appeared, still in his formal suit from whatever engagement he had been attending. His face was tight with worry, his normally warm eyes dark with concern. "How long has she been in there?" he asked James, not bothering with formalities. "Nearly 40 minutes now, sir. Dr. Henderson should arrive any moment." William nodded curtly and knocked gently on the door. "Catherine, it's me, I'm here." The door opened slightly, and Catherine's face appeared. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her usually perfect hair slightly disheveled. She looked relieved to see her husband, but also exhausted, as if she had been fighting a battle for the past hour. "She won't tell me what happened," Catherine whispered, her voice breaking. "She just keeps crying and saying she can't do it anymore. William, I don't know what to do." In that moment, James Mitchell saw something that would stay with him for the rest of his life. He saw two parents, despite all their titles and privileges, facing the same fear every parent knows, the fear of not being able to protect their child from pain. The look of helplessness on William's face as he pulled Catherine close was utterly human, utterly real. The palace chaos that would unfold in the coming hours had only just begun, but in that corridor, watching these two people struggle with their daughter's crisis, James understood that this was no ordinary day. This was a day that would change everything. William stepped into the room, and James quietly closed the door behind him, giving the family their privacy. But even through the thick oak, he could hear the prince's gentle voice speaking to his daughter, low and soothing. Dr. Sarah Henderson arrived moments later, her professional bag in hand and her expression calm despite the urgent summons. James had met Dr. Henderson before during routine security briefings. She was in her early 50s, with kind gray eyes and a manner that immediately put people at ease. She had worked with the royal family for years, though her visits were always discreet, always private. The fact that Catherine had called for her spoke volumes about the severity of the situation. "Officer Mitchell," Dr. Henderson greeted him with a nod. "How is she?" "Still very upset, doctor. The prince just went in." She knocked softly on the door. Catherine opened it almost immediately, relief flooding her features when she saw who it was. "Sarah, thank you for coming so quickly." "Of course, let me see what I can do." The door closed again, and James was left in the corridor with Sophie, who had finally sat down on one of the antique chairs, her head in her hands. The palace felt eerily quiet. Somewhere in the distance, James could hear the normal sounds of palace life continuing. Staff members preparing for the day, groundskeepers working in the gardens, the faint sound of traffic from beyond the palace walls. But here, in this corridor, time seemed suspended. Nearly an hour passed before the door opened again. Dr. Henderson emerged first, her expression thoughtful. She gestured for James to step aside with her, away from where Sophie could overhear. "The prince and princess would like to speak with you," she said quietly. "Charlotte is resting now, but there are some things they need to arrange, and they trust you to help maintain discretion." James nodded and entered the room. It was a private sitting room he had seen many times before during security sweeps, but never like this. Cushions from the sofa were scattered on the floor. A knocked-over cup of tea had left a stain on the expensive rug. In the corner, on a window seat overlooking the palace gardens, Princess Charlotte sat curled up with a blanket around her shoulders. Her face was blotchy from crying, her eyes downcast. William and Catherine stood together near the fireplace. Catherine's hand was clasped tightly in William's, and both looked drained. But there was also determination in their expressions. "James," William began, his voice quiet but steady, "what we're about to tell you cannot leave this room. Do you understand?" "Absolutely, sir. You have my word." Catherine spoke next, her voice thick with emotion. "Charlotte has been struggling for months. We thought we were managing it, helping her cope with the pressures. But this morning something happened at her school. Other children said things, cruel things about her position, her family. They told her she thinks she's better than everyone else, that she gets special treatment." William picked up where Catherine left off. Charlotte tried to explain that she didn't ask to be a princess, that she just wants to be normal, to have friends like any other child. But they wouldn't listen. They surrounded her on the playground and started chanting, calling her names. James felt anger rise in his chest. He glanced at Charlotte, who had pulled the blanket tighter around herself. She was so small, so young to be dealing with such cruelty. "The teachers intervened," Catherine continued. "But by then, Charlotte was already devastated. When we picked her up, she wouldn't speak. She just ran straight to her room and locked the door. It took us hours to get her to come out, and when she finally did, she told us she wants to give it all up. She said she doesn't want to be a princess anymore. She just wants to be a normal girl." The words hung in the air. James had never imagined hearing something like this. Princess Charlotte, third in line to the throne, wanting to give up her position. It was unthinkable. And yet, looking at the broken child across the room, he understood completely. "Dr. Henderson has recommended that Charlotte take some time away from school," William explained. "We're going to pull her out for the rest of the term, but that means we need to control the narrative. The press can't know the real reason. They'll twist it, make it worse." "We need to issue a statement," Catherine added. "Something about educational opportunities, perhaps homeschooling for a while. But we need to make sure everyone on staff understands that this is private. Charlotte's well-being depends on it." James nodded slowly. "I'll speak to the household staff personally, everyone who saw or heard anything this morning. They're loyal, they'll understand." "There's more," William said, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of exhaustion. "We're considering taking the whole family away for a while, somewhere private where Charlotte can just be a child. No cameras, no obligations, no scrutiny." It was a bold move, James thought. The royal family was expected to maintain their public duties, their engagements. For them to step back, even temporarily, would raise questions. But looking at Charlotte, still silent and withdrawn, he knew it was the right decision. "What about Prince George and Princess Louis?" James asked. Catherine's eyes filled with tears again. "George knows something is wrong with his sister. He's been wonderful trying to cheer her up. And Louis is too young to understand. But yes, they'll all come with us. This family needs time to heal together." Dr. Henderson stepped forward. "I've recommended a month minimum. Charlotte needs space to process what happened and to work through her feelings about her role. She's not rejecting her family or her heritage. She's a 9-year-old girl who got hurt by her peers and doesn't have the tools yet to understand that their cruelty comes from their own insecurities, not from anything she's done wrong." James looked at the doctor with respect. She had put into words what he had been thinking. This wasn't about Charlotte being spoiled or dramatic. This was about a child in genuine emotional pain. "Where will you go?" James asked. William and Catherine exchanged glances. "Anmer Hall," William said finally, referring to their private country home in Norfolk. "It's secure, it's private, and it's home to us. The children love it there. Charlotte can ride her pony, explore the grounds, just be herself." "When do you want to leave?" James asked. "Tomorrow," Catherine said firmly. "We can't wait. Every day Charlotte spends here, worrying about school, about being seen, about living up to expectations, is another day of suffering for her." James nodded. Tomorrow. That gave him less than 24 hours to coordinate security arrangements, brief the staff, and ensure that this family's privacy would be protected. It would be a challenge, but he had faced challenges before. "I'll make it happen," he promised. "You have my word. Charlotte will have the privacy and protection she needs." As James left the room to begin his preparations, he paused at the door and looked back. William had crossed to where Charlotte sat and was kneeling beside her, speaking softly. Catherine joined them, wrapping her arms around her daughter. For a moment, they weren't royals. They were just a family, holding each other tight against the storm. Outside in the corridor, Sophie stood up as James emerged. "What's happening?" she asked anxiously. James put a hand on her shoulder. "The family needs some time away. We need to prepare for a move to Anmer Hall by tomorrow. Can you help coordinate that?" Sophie straightened, her professional demeanor returning. "Of course, I'll start immediately." As they walked down the corridor together, already planning logistics, James felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. This was more than just another security detail. This was about protecting a child's mental health, a family's privacy, and perhaps most importantly, a little girl's right to be just that, a little girl. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of careful planning and quiet coordination. James Mitchell found himself at the center of an operation that required absolute discretion. He started by gathering the key staff members who had witnessed Charlotte's distress that morning. In a small meeting room away from the main palace corridors, he addressed Mrs. Chapman, the groundskeeper, 2 housemaids, and 3 other security officers. Their faces showed concern mixed with loyalty. These were people who had served the royal family for years, some for decades. They understood the unspoken contract of their positions, discretion above all else. "What I'm about to share with you stays in this room," James began, his voice firm but kind. "Princess Charlotte had a difficult experience at school yesterday. She's struggling with the pressures of her position, and her parents have decided to take the family to Anmer Hall for an extended private stay. The official line, if anyone asks, is that the family is pursuing alternative educational opportunities for the children. Nothing more, nothing less." Mrs. Chapman wiped her eyes with her apron. "That poor child," she murmured. "Of course we'll keep quiet. She's such a sweet girl. Always says thank you, always smiles. I had no idea she was hurting like this." "None of us did," James replied. "And that's part of the problem. She's been putting on a brave face for everyone. It's time she got to take that mask off." The staff members nodded in understanding. One of the younger housemaids raised her hand tentatively. "What about the press? They follow the family everywhere. How will we keep this private?" James had already thought about this. The communications team is preparing a statement about the family taking a break for educational reasons. It's vague enough to be believable but specific enough to satisfy initial curiosity. As for Anmer Hall, we're increasing security there to ensure the family's privacy. No unauthorized photographs, no leaks about their activities. Meanwhile, Sophie was working tirelessly to coordinate the logistics of the move. She contacted the household staff at Anmer Hall, arranging for rooms to be prepared, supplies to be stocked, and most importantly, ensuring that the environment would be as stress-free as possible for Charlotte. She ordered art supplies, books, puzzles, anything that might help the young princess find joy again. William spent the afternoon in meetings, rearranging his schedule for the next month. Engagements were postponed, appearances canceled. His private secretary was stunned by the sudden changes but knew better than to question the prince's decisions. Catherine, meanwhile, sat with Charlotte in her room, just being present, letting her daughter know she wasn't alone. Prince George, at 11 years old, was more perceptive than his parents sometimes gave him credit for. He knocked on Charlotte's door late that afternoon, carrying her favorite stuffed rabbit that she thought she had lost months ago. "I found Mr. Hops under my bed," George said softly when Charlotte opened the door. "I thought you might want him back." Charlotte took the worn rabbit, and for the first time that day, a small smile crossed her face. "Thank you, Georgie," she whispered. George hesitated, then asked the question that had been bothering him all day. "Are you okay? Really okay?" Charlotte looked at her older brother, seeing the genuine concern in his eyes. "I don't know," she admitted. "Sometimes I feel like everyone expects me to be perfect all the time, and I'm not. I'm just me." George sat down beside her on the window seat. "I know what you mean. I feel that way too sometimes. But Mum and Dad keep telling me that we don't have to be perfect. We just have to be kind and try our best." "But what about the other kids?" Charlotte asked, her voice breaking. "They hate me because I'm a princess. I never asked to be one. I didn't choose this." George thought about this carefully. Maybe they don't really hate you. Maybe they're just jealous or confused. People say mean things when they don't understand. But Charlotte, being a princess isn't just about titles and duties. It's about who we are as people. And you're the best sister anyone could ask for. Catherine, who had been listening from just outside the door, felt tears spring to her eyes. Her children were so much wiser than she sometimes realized. She knocked gently and entered, finding both her older children sitting together, George's arm around Charlotte's shoulders. "How would you both feel about spending some time at Anmer Hall?" Catherine asked, settling beside them. "Just our family, no schedules, no obligations. We could ride horses, have picnics in the meadow, play games, just be together." George's face lit up. "Really? For how long?" "A month, maybe more," Catherine replied. "We all need a break, and Charlotte especially needs time to heal." Charlotte looked up at her mother with hope in her eyes. "No school, no events, no people staring at us." "No school, no events, no cameras," Catherine confirmed. "Just us being a family." That evening, as the palace prepared for the family's departure the next morning, James did one final security sweep of Anmer Hall via video conference with the team stationed there. The house looked warm and welcoming, its rooms filled with family photographs and comfortable furniture. It was a place where the royal titles could be set aside, at least for a while. Dr. Henderson arrived at the palace again that evening to check on Charlotte before the family left. She spent an hour with the young princess, talking through her feelings and giving her some simple techniques to manage her anxiety. When she emerged, she spoke briefly with William and Catherine. "She's still fragile," the doctor explained, "but I see strength in her too. This time away will do wonders, but you'll need to be patient. Healing isn't linear. She'll have good days and bad days." "We understand," William said. "Whatever she needs, however long it takes." That night Charlotte slept more peacefully than she had in weeks, Mr. Hops tucked securely under her arm. Across the hall, Prince Louis slept soundly, blissfully unaware of the family crisis. George lay awake for a while, thinking about his sister and silently promising himself he would do whatever he could to help her feel better. William and Catherine sat together in their private sitting room, hands clasped, exhausted but resolute. They had made the right decision. They knew the media would speculate, that there would be questions and criticism, but none of that mattered. Charlotte's well-being was more important than any public appearance or royal duty. "Do you think we're doing the right thing?" Catherine asked, though she already knew the answer. William pulled her close. "I know we are. We're choosing our daughter over everything else. That's what parents do." As the night deepened over Kensington Palace, James Mitchell completed his final rounds. Tomorrow morning before dawn, the family would quietly leave for Norfolk. The press would eventually notice their absence, and the official statement would be released. But for now, in these quiet hours, there was only preparation and hope. Hope that time away from the spotlight would give Charlotte the space she needed to rediscover her joy. Hope that, as a family, they would emerge from this crisis stronger and closer. And most of all, hope that a 9-year-old girl would learn that she was loved not for her title, but for exactly who she was. The convoy left Kensington Palace at 5:30 in the morning, just as the first hints of dawn touched the London sky. 2 unmarked vehicles carried the family, with security cars positioned discreetly ahead and behind. Charlotte sat between her brothers in the back seat, staring out the window as the city slowly gave way to countryside. James Mitchell rode in the lead security vehicle, coordinating their route and ensuring there were no media following. He had arranged for a decoy convoy to leave through the main gates an hour later, complete with look-alike vehicles, just in case any photographers were watching. So far, their departure seemed to have gone unnoticed. The drive to Norfolk took just over 2 hours. Louis fell asleep within the first 30 minutes, his head resting on Charlotte's shoulder. George pulled out a book but found himself watching his sister instead. She seemed calmer this morning, though her face still carried the weight of yesterday's pain. "Look," William said softly as they turned onto the private road leading to Anmer Hall. "We're almost home." Charlotte pressed her face against the window as the familiar red brick Georgian house came into view. The morning sun bathed it in golden light, and the surrounding meadows stretched out in peaceful green waves. She felt something loosen in her chest, a tension she hadn't even realized she was carrying. The household staff at Anmer Hall greeted them warmly but briefly, understanding that the family needed space. Within an hour, the children had changed into comfortable clothes and were exploring the grounds. Louis raced ahead, his laughter carrying on the breeze. George walked alongside Charlotte, pointing out changes since their last visit: a new garden bed, repairs to the old stone wall, a family of rabbits that had taken up residence near the stables. Charlotte wandered to the stables where her pony, Buttercup, was waiting. The gentle mare whinnied in recognition, nuzzling Charlotte's hand when she reached out. For the first time in days, Charlotte felt herself smile genuinely. "I missed you," she whispered to the pony, stroking her soft nose. "I'm sorry I haven't been to see you." Catherine watched from the stable doorway, her heart both breaking and mending at the sight. This was what her daughter needed: simplicity, connection, unconditional love from creatures who didn't care about titles or royal duties. The first few days at Anmer Hall passed quietly. The family established new routines, ones that had nothing to do with official schedules or public appearances. They had breakfast together in the sunny kitchen, often still in their pajamas. They took long walks across the estate, collected eggs from the chickens, and played board games that sometimes lasted for hours. Charlotte was quiet at first, participating but not fully present. Dr. Henderson visited twice during that first week, having sessions with Charlotte in the comfortable library that overlooked the gardens. The doctor taught her breathing exercises for when she felt overwhelmed and helped her understand that the mean words from her classmates said more about them than about her. "They don't hate you," Dr. Henderson explained gently during one of their sessions. "They're confused by what makes you different, and sometimes when people don't understand something, they lash out. But that doesn't make what they said true, and it doesn't make it your fault." Charlotte absorbed these words slowly. It was hard to let go of the hurt, to stop replaying the scene on the playground over and over in her mind. But gradually, with each passing day in this peaceful place, the sharp edges of the pain began to dull. Meanwhile, back in London, the media had indeed noticed the family's absence. The official statement had been released, citing educational opportunities and family time. Most outlets accepted this at face value, running brief stories about modern royal parenting approaches. But a few journalists dug deeper, questioning why all three children had been pulled from school simultaneously. James Mitchell monitored the coverage carefully from his post at Anmer Hall. He had assembled a small, trusted security team for the duration of the family's stay. They maintained a perimeter around the estate while staying invisible to the family themselves. The goal was protection without intrusion. One morning, about 10 days into their stay, James was doing his rounds when he encountered Charlotte in the garden. She was sitting on a bench, sketching in a notebook. She looked up when she heard his footsteps. "Good morning, Officer Mitchell," she said politely. "Good morning, Your Royal Highness," he replied, then paused. "May I ask what you're drawing?" Charlotte held up her notebook, showing a surprisingly detailed sketch of Buttercup in her stable. "I'm trying to capture how peaceful she looks," Charlotte explained. "Horses don't worry about what other horses think of them. They just exist." James smiled gently. "That's very wise, and it's a beautiful drawing." Charlotte was quiet for a moment, then looked up at him with those serious eyes that seemed too old for her young face. "Officer Mitchell, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you think I'm spoiled? Do you think I get special treatment because of who I am?" James crouched down so he was at eye level with her. He thought carefully about his answer, knowing how important this moment was. "I think you have opportunities that many children don't have, that's true. But I also think you carry responsibilities that most children could never imagine. Every time you step outside, people watch you. Every mistake you make is magnified. Every achievement is scrutinized. That's not special treatment, Your Royal Highness. That's a burden." Charlotte's eyes filled with tears. "I never asked for it." "I know you didn't," James said softly. "But here's what I've learned in my years of service. Being a princess isn't about castles or crowns. It's about the kind of person you choose to be, regardless of the title. And from what I've seen, you're already becoming someone quite remarkable. You're kind to the staff, you care about others, and you're honest about your feelings. Those things have nothing to do with being royal and everything to do with being a good person." Charlotte wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Really?" "Really," James confirmed. "Your title is just one part of who you are. It doesn't define you unless you let it." That conversation marked a turning point. In the days that followed, Charlotte began to engage more fully with her family. She laughed at George's jokes, helped Louis build elaborate block towers, and even started joining her parents for morning walks. The color returned to her cheeks, and the light came back to her eyes. William and Catherine watched their daughter's transformation with grateful hearts. They knew this was just the beginning of her healing, that there would still be challenges ahead. But seeing her smile genuinely, hearing her laugh freely, these were gifts they would never take for granted again. The palace chaos that had erupted that fateful morning had given way to something unexpected. It had given them time. Time to heal, time to reconnect, time to remember what truly mattered. And for Princess Charlotte, it had given her something even more precious. The space to understand that she was more than her title, more than the expectations placed upon her. She was simply Charlotte, a girl who loved horses and art, who had a kind heart and a gentle spirit, who was learning that being herself was more than enough. 3 weeks into their stay at Anmer Hall, something remarkable happened. Charlotte woke up one morning and realized she had slept through the entire night without nightmares for the first time since the incident at school. The house was quiet, filled with that special stillness of early morning. She climbed out of bed and padded to the window, looking out over the misty meadows. The world felt different somehow, lighter. The weight that had pressed on her chest for so long had eased. She could breathe deeply again. As she stood there in her pajamas, watching the sun slowly burn away the morning mist, Charlotte made a decision. She was ready to talk about what happened, really talk about it, not just with Dr. Henderson but with her family too. That evening after dinner, Charlotte asked if they could all sit together in the living room. William and Catherine exchanged glances, recognizing the significance of this request. George and Louis settled on the floor with their toys, while the adults took seats on the comfortable sofas. Charlotte stood in front of the fireplace, her hands clasped together. She looked nervous but determined. "I want to tell you all something," she began, her voice steady despite the tremor James could hear from where he stood discreetly in the hallway, ensuring their privacy. "What happened at school wasn't the first time kids said mean things to me," Charlotte admitted. "It's been happening for months. They whisper when I walk by. They don't invite me to birthday parties. When we play games, they don't pick me for teams unless the teacher makes them. I tried to ignore it, tried to be extra nice, tried to prove I wasn't stuck up. But nothing worked. And that day on the playground, when they all surrounded me and started chanting, something inside me just broke." Catherine's hand flew to her mouth, tears already streaming down her face. William's jaw tightened, but he remained silent, letting Charlotte continue. "I felt so alone," Charlotte continued, her own tears starting to fall. "Like no one understood what it was like to be me. I couldn't tell you because you already worry so much about all of us. I couldn't tell George because he's the heir and he has his own pressures. And Louis is too little, so I just kept it all inside until I couldn't anymore." George stood up abruptly. "Charlotte, I'm your big brother. You should have told me. I would have helped you. I would have done something." "But that's just it," Charlotte said, looking at him with red eyes. "You can't fix this, Georgie. Nobody can. We can't change who we are or what family we were born into. And those kids, they're going to think what they think no matter what I do." William moved to kneel in front of his daughter. "You're right. We can't change who we are. But Charlotte, being part of this family, being a princess, it's not a curse. Yes, it comes with challenges that other children don't face, but it also gives you opportunities to make a real difference in the world. When you grow up, you'll have a platform to speak about things that matter, to help people who need it." "Your father's right," Catherine added, coming to sit beside them. "But more importantly, you need to know that you never have to carry these burdens alone. We're a team, all of us. When one of us is hurting, we all hurt, and we all help each other heal." Charlotte nodded, wiping her eyes. "Dr. Henderson helped me understand something. She said that how people treat me says more about them than about me, and that I get to choose how I respond. I can let their meanness make me mean too, or I can choose to be kind anyway. Not for them, but for myself." "That's very wise," William said, pride evident in his voice. "I've been thinking," Charlotte continued, "about what I want to do when we go back. I don't want to go back to my old school, not because I'm running away, but because I think I need a fresh start, somewhere where people don't already have opinions about me before they even meet me." Catherine and William looked at each other. They had been discussing this very possibility with Dr. Henderson. "We can make that happen," Catherine said gently, "if that's what you truly want." "It is," Charlotte said firmly. "But I also want to do something else. I want to find a way to help other kids who feel left out or bullied. I don't know exactly how yet, but I want to use my position to make things better, not just feel sorry for myself." In the hallway, James Mitchell felt his eyes prickle with unexpected tears. This little girl, who just weeks ago had been so broken she couldn't stop crying, was already thinking about how to help others. She was going to be okay, more than okay. She was going to be extraordinary. Over the next week, the family worked together on a plan. They researched schools with strong anti-bullying programs and inclusive environments. They discussed ways Charlotte could get involved in youth mental health initiatives when she was older. They talked about the importance of having trusted friends and adults to confide in. Dr. Henderson visited one final time before the family prepared to return to London. She spent an hour with Charlotte, and when they emerged from their session, both were smiling. "She's ready," Dr. Henderson told William and Catherine privately. "Not ready to be perfect or to never struggle again, but ready to face challenges with better tools and more support. And most importantly, she knows now that asking for help isn't weakness, it's strength." The night before they left Anmer Hall, Charlotte wrote a letter, not to anyone in particular, just to herself. She wrote about what she had learned, about the pain she had experienced, and about the person she wanted to become. She folded it carefully and placed it in her journal, a reminder for future hard days. The morning of their departure, Charlotte went to the stables one last time to say goodbye to Buttercup. She promised the pony they would visit again soon. As she walked back to the house, she paused to look at Anmer Hall one more time. This place had given her something invaluable. It had given her space to fall apart and time to put herself back together. The journey back to London was different from the journey there. The car was filled with chatter and laughter instead of tense silence. George taught Louis a new card game, and Charlotte looked out the window with something that looked remarkably like hope on her face. James Mitchell, riding in the lead vehicle once again, allowed himself a small smile. His urgent call for help that morning weeks ago had set something in motion, something that might have saved not just Charlotte's immediate well-being, but possibly shaped the course of her entire life. Sometimes the most important thing you could do was simply recognize when someone needed help and have the courage to act on it. When they arrived at Kensington Palace, the staff welcomed them back warmly but discreetly. Mrs. Chapman had baked Charlotte's favorite biscuits. Sophie had arranged fresh flowers in all the rooms. Everyone understood that something significant had happened, and that this family had emerged from their crisis changed for the better. That evening, as Charlotte got ready for bed in her own room at the palace, she looked at herself in the mirror. She saw a girl who had been hurt but had survived. A girl who had fallen apart but had found the strength to heal. A girl who was learning that being vulnerable wasn't the same as being weak. She was still a princess. That hadn't changed and never would. But now she understood that being a princess was just one part of her identity, not the whole thing. She was Charlotte. She was kind, creative, brave, and still learning. She had a family who loved her unconditionally, friends who would stand by her, and adults she could trust when things got hard. The palace chaos that had erupted that fateful morning had led to something unexpected and beautiful. It had led to healing, to understanding, to growth. It had reminded everyone involved that beneath the titles and the formality, the royal family was still just that, a family, with all the love, struggles, and messy humanity that entailed. As Charlotte climbed into bed that night, Mr. Hops tucked beside her, she thought about tomorrow. There would be challenges ahead. New schools meant new adjustments. There would be days when the pressure felt too heavy again, but she also knew now that she didn't have to face any of it alone. Across the palace, in his small office, James Mitchell completed his shift report. He noted the family's safe return, the smooth transition, the absence of any security concerns. But he didn't write about the real story, about a young girl who had panicked, a royal guard who had recognized the urgency of her distress, and a family who had chosen love over protocol. Some stories were too precious, too private to be reduced to official reports. He thought about his own daughters, now grown with children of their own. He thought about all the children struggling in silence, carrying burdens too heavy for their young shoulders. And he hoped that somewhere, somehow, Charlotte's story, even if only those closest to her ever knew it, would serve as a reminder that it was okay to fall apart sometimes. Because in the falling apart, in the asking for help, in the allowing others to see your vulnerability, that was where real strength was found. The lights in the palace dimmed one by one as night deepened. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new responsibilities, new pressures. But tonight, a little girl slept peacefully, knowing she was loved not for what she represented but for who she was. And in the end, that made all the difference.